So someone in government sends you an email and goes, hey, you're going to get a $5,000, a $10,000, $50,000 fine because you've missed a certain deadline to do something. We have opportunity for you here. You could have a pathway to growth. You could join our company. We want to make sure that we have opportunities and we're creating something for you and we can welcome you onto the team, which we all know is complete crap because you don't actually go anywhere from removing staples. What's the word that they use? It was character building. The purpose of the contract is usually not because you're worried that the other side is evil and they're going to screw you over. The purpose of the contract is for you to draw up a structure so that you can communicate what exactly each party is responsible for. So you're sitting there thinking, I've finished my contract, everything's really great, I'm going to send the invoice now, and then you get an email reply going, thank you for your invoice. Here is the 47-step process that we need and the 62,000 documents that we need from you in order to pay you. There's one level of communication that you have with the procurement and the finance side, and then there's a different level of communication that you have with the customer, and sometimes you want to maintain that customer relationship. These questions, man, they're like so stressful. What the fuck?
Hello, you beautiful people, and welcome to the Solo Sauce podcast. My name is Joeri, and on this show, I have honest conversations with real people who are working for themselves, sharing real stories, lessons learned, and maybe even some practical ideas that you can use on your solo journey. Hey, on today's episode, I am joined by Loucille Sabapathy, who is a corporate secretary. Actually, she is my corporate secretary. Loucille helps businesses like mine stay compliant, structured, and out of trouble, even when things get messy behind the scenes. We talk about why the boring stuff matters a lot more than you think, what actually breaks when you ignore those things, and how business owners can set themselves up properly without overcomplicating things. As always, I'll be back at the end with some of my thoughts, maybe even some questions, but for now, enjoy my conversation with Loucille Sabapathy.
I need to say congratulations to you, by the way, because I think it's now officially 10 years you and I have been working together. Did you know that? It's our anniversary.
Really? I thought it was 2013. Might be 2015. Yeah. It was a long time ago when we were little.
So happy
little
anniversary.
babies. Yes. Happy anniversary to you too.
So let's just start with a simple question. What is your journey from, I doubt at the age of 7, you're like, I'm going to become a corporate secretary. How did you get to where you are now?
I was doing a lot of office manager work for quite a few years. I was doing event coordination, I was doing administration, and I was usually in roles in companies where I was interfacing with the accountants or the corporate secretaries or the tax agents, etc. And I found that work really interesting. It's got aspects of legal, aspects of accounting, aspects of tax, but it's also got things like HR. It's got things like branding. It touches areas that have to do with your company's communications to the public, how you communicate in your business. There was a lot of, I think, variety in the kind of topics that I would communicate with these corporate secretaries or these accountants, just to, get the company that I was working for to the place that they needed to go. And I just thought that's a really interesting job. That's not a job where you'd wake up every day and you're kind of doing the same thing, because you're actually solving problems for customers. And so every customer is going to have a slightly different problem. So you're always going to need to look at the situation, ideally with fresh eyes, to understand that particular customer's challenges and how to, I guess, figure out something that works best for them. And so I think that sort of like variation in the day-to-day was a lot more interesting to me than just kind of doing the same thing all the time.
Oh, quick one. If you are enjoying this, I would really appreciate it if you left a like, you left a comment, or you share this episode with somebody who needs to see it or hear it, depending on where you watch, listen, and stuff. Anyway, let's get back into the episode.
So that sort of put me on the path of, let's figure out, what do I need to study? What do I need to get certified in order to make that switch into being a corporate secretary?
I actually don't know. What was your first job?
Ooh, my first few jobs, I went to an agency when I must have been like 15. And you know how way back in the day, you and I will know this because way back in the day, this thing was very common. Now it's not. You go to an agency and you say, hey, I'm looking for some work during school holidays or whatever. And they go, right, we can send you for 2 days over here, a week over there. We've got lots of bits and pieces of work and we'll just charge you out on an hourly basis or a daily basis. So my first few jobs were wrapping presents during Christmas for one of the big malls. I did that for like a week and a half to 2 weeks. I put together all these sort of like Christmas and New Year bundles that come in like the nice basket with like the fruit and everything and all the product baskets and whatnot. I did telephone sales, customer service. What else did I do? I had one really odd role for a week where I went in and I was asked to remove staples from a giant pile of paperwork. So I don't know what happened, but the company said, right, every stack has got like 4 pieces of paper in it. We want you to remove the staple, take out one page, photocopy it, put the photocopy back in, restaple it, and then put it on the stack next to the one that you just took it off. So I spent a week literally just removing staples and photocopying stuff. And they tried to sell me the we have opportunity for you here. You could have a pathway to growth. You could join our company. We want to make sure that we have opportunities and we're creating something for you and we can welcome you onto the team, which we all know is complete crap because you don't actually go anywhere from removing staples. But they spent a lot of time pulling me aside, having these chats with me about opportunities that they were going to give me as a 16-year-old who was going back to school in like 3.5 weeks if I removed these staples really, really well. So that was an interesting week for sure.
Fun fact for the listeners. And after that, Lucille set up Staples and became a multi-billionaire in the US.
Oh, imagine. Sadly, no.
Did they at least give you those? What are those called? Those little. It's like a little. You know those things to pull out staples. Did they at least give you that, or were you sitting there with your little fingers?
No, I was using the back of the staple where they've sometimes got like a little ledge on the little back of it, and then you just sort of pry the staple off. It wasn't even a proper staple remover. It wasn't. Yeah, it was what's the word that they use? It was character building. I used to hear that a lot. Like anytime you have a weird or a bad job, this is character building. It's an opportunity for you to really grow as a person. Gotta love that one.
Imagine you were still wrapping Christmas baskets and taking out staples. There's a difference. But looking back, at least for me, I look back at some of the jobs I've done. It was kind of weird, but it's kind of cool. It's a cool story now. So then you just write that off as like character building. That was a unique experience.
Yeah, that is true.
Everybody I know who's worked in customer service has stories of people who are either super rude or weird or odd or fantastic. What is the weirdest story you have around customer service?
The people who call up and insist that like their service needs to be reconnected and they've paid the bill and it turns out they haven't paid the bill. And then they yell at you for like 20 minutes and you just kind of have to like hold the line and say like, yes, sir, I'm so sorry, sir. Oh, I'm so sorry to hear that, sir. Oh, that sounds terrible, sir. Oh, that's really unfortunate. Oh dear. Oh my gosh. You didn't have the internet. You couldn't watch the porn you wanted to watch. So sad. So tragic. Let me see what I can do about that for you. So nothing, I think, really crazy out of the ordinary. I've definitely had people who would call up. There was a couple of older people who I think were lonely and they'd just call up for a chat. And they'd sort of memorize the names of all the different customer service officers. So that you'd pick up the phone and they'd say, hello, first name. Nice to hear your voice. I just wanted to check on a bill. And they had nothing to talk about the bill at all. It was just, let's just have like a 10-minute chat. And yeah. That was actually pretty common. One thing I suppose that comes to mind is, do you remember those giant brick phones, the ETAC? I think they're called ETAC phones, like a brick with a big antenna on it. I had a job for like, I think 3 weeks or something where we were supposed to call all of these people who still had the brick phones and say to them, hi, we want to offer you the opportunity to switch over to this new Siemens clamshell phone because we're switching to a new network because it's a completely different network. So you can't actually use that on whatever was the previous thing before 3G. Quite a few of them said, I refuse to give up my brick phone because it makes me look cool. but you know that it's like a 60-year-old guy in business who's probably, I don't know, spends half his time not working anymore because he's semi-retired playing golf or something with his like giant phone hanging off his belt, dragging his pants down, and like picks up his phone and says hello really loudly. And I'm like, no, but my phone's really cool. It's really special. A lot of people respect me because of this phone. I heard that a lot. I heard a lot of people respect me because I have this phone.
You worked in-house, and at one point you started working for yourself. Why did you make that change? What happened there?
As a corporate secretary, having the freedom to engage with clients, especially with the kind of clients that I had the good luck of sort of meeting and being introduced to, being on my own actually made a lot more sense than working with a firm. I got quite lucky in that I connected with a lot of tech startups during a certain phase where there were a lot of government grants, a lot of government support, a lot of initiatives and programs to try and promote software development companies, technology companies, companies that are building apps and things like that in Singapore during, I would say sort of like 2011 to 2016. So it was sort of a 5-year period where there was really an uptick in these programs. And yeah, I was very fortunate to be connected with a couple of people who made introductions, and those people made more introductions. And I reached a point certainly where I did consider, do I want to go and work for a corporate secretarial firm or do I want to set up on my own? A lot of these tech startups, I think with the speed at which they want to work, with the momentum at which they want to get things done, I felt like I could actually do more and I could provide more value to them and keep up with their momentum if I was working on my own. So that fed into my decision to go ahead and set up on my own instead of, I guess, working in-house in another organization.
What does a corporate secretary actually do?
Okay. So a corporate secretary is a qualified individual. And in order to get that status, you have to do a registration. At least in Singapore, you do a registration with ACRA. You need to pass an exam. You need to do a regular test. You need to renew your license every couple of years to prove that you're up to date with all of the requirements for things like government filings, for things like submitting paperwork for companies, for understanding all of the rules and requirements and the Companies Act, and essentially anything that a private limited company or a sole proprietor or a partnership needs to do in order to stay compliant. So it's, I guess, a lot of paperwork.
But why is the role so important for small business then? For big business, of course, as well. But why is it so important for people who work for themselves, like entrepreneurs and solopreneurs?
A lot of small businesses just sort of function under the assumption that I can just get all this stuff sorted out when a deadline comes about. I can just sort of work on my own. I can just figure all of this stuff out. It's pretty straightforward. I just need to go online and put something into ChatGPT and say, how do I file my annual return, or how do I put together my financial statement? And they'll get an answer. It'll be potentially an incomplete answer, but they'll get an answer. And it kind of sounds mostly correct. But what they're probably not aware of is that there's a lot of interconnected intricacies that they need to think about when they're making certain business decisions. So, for example, if you're going to set up a company, what is your corporate tax exposure? Where are you doing business? Do you want to register your company with a specific type of business code that gives you access to grants or opportunities for funding from different government agencies? There's quite a bit that isn't immediately obvious because it's siloed in different government agencies or different types of business support portals. So unless you're sort of across all of this different information, unless you're going to go and research all of this different information and then try and figure out how it works together, you're probably not going to get the answers to certain questions by just going on ChatGPT. You do need to consult with someone who's potentially had enough experience and I guess the breadth of understanding to see how a specific decision might impact, say, 5 or 6 different things that your company might need to do.
What usually breaks first when the so-called boring stuff doesn't get handled properly?
I think there are a couple of different things that come to mind when you ask that question. One side of it is compliance and regulatory, which sounds like big words, but essentially it's not getting filings done on time. So someone in government sends you an email and goes, hey, you're going to get a $5,000 or $10,000 or $50,000 fine because you've missed a certain deadline to do something. And a lot of the time, those deadlines are predictable. A lot of the time you can prepare in advance for that. But to be fair to a lot of business owners, they're really busy and they're working on a lot of different projects. They've got so many different things going on at any point in time. They're thinking about maybe funding for their business. They're thinking about branding. They're thinking about client communications. They're thinking about their team members and who they need to manage and how they need to manage work. There's a lot going on day to day for a business owner. So it completely makes sense that a deadline might get missed once in a while. But most of the time when you miss a deadline, you can go back to your customer or you can go back to someone in your team and you can say, hey, I'm sorry. How do we fix this problem? Or, we'll figure something out. When it comes to government filings, that's not really an option, right? It's either you do it or you don't, and then you might get a fine. So that's sort of one that I think comes to mind. I think the other thing that tends to break, and we've talked a little bit about this, is working with people who might not be the best fit for your business. And that could be friends and family members, or it could be people you hire, or it could be, say, former colleagues that you've worked with. Because there's a very big difference between working with someone or having a relationship with someone inside a small business versus day-to-day life, versus a colleague in a huge organization, versus, say, organizing a trip with family members, right? That's an experience that in my experience working with clients, if there's no formal structure around that, if there's no clear expectations, if there's no clear documentation, scope of work, things like that, if you just kind of go into it like, we're good mates, we'll figure this out. He's really good at this, I'm really good at that, should be fine, no problem. Usually things do not go well. And when I say usually, I mean like 99% of the time. Sometimes people ask me, what is the number one reason that you've seen that companies just kind of go bust or break up or whatever the case might be, or just close? It's usually people, usually some kind of a people problem.
Some falling out over something. Things get personal, money gets in between, difference of expectations. I've seen the same in my circle.
And it's not necessarily a difficult problem to solve, right? It's really, at least from where I'm standing, it's about putting things down on paper. It's about having clear expectations. It's about over communicating and documenting what your expectations are. And sometimes just even starting the conversation is enough for you and that other person to go, hang on a second, maybe we shouldn't be working together. Or, we've had this chat, it sounds really good, but now that we're talking about the specifics of the scope, it turns out actually you and I were on different pages, and let me just, take a step back from this. But even just initiating that conversation changes the dynamic of the relationship between the business owner and the person that they want to bring in. But yeah, that strangely enough is the most common reason that I've seen companies just fall.
Let's look at it from the other side. And a lot of the listeners here. So I decide tomorrow I'm going to start my own business. I'm going to sell services. What is the minimum setup I need to have in place to make sure that I don't get into trouble and I fare well?
So there's a part of me that says it really depends on the business, and we should definitely have a chat on what that looks like because it's different for every business. If I had to identify certain sort of minimum standards, I would say that you want to take a look at how much revenue you're making, which will determine potentially what structure you want your business to have, whether that's going to be you as a solo individual doing sole proprietor, whether that's you setting up a limited liability company, whether that's you going into a partnership with someone. Getting the right structure and understanding why you're choosing a certain structure, I think, is really important for a couple of reasons. One is you want to set yourself up right, but two is it might be a transition stage. As a solopreneur, you might actually start out just doing a sole proprietor situation where it's just you, right? Maybe that works for the first 2 or 3 years. Maybe financially that makes sense for you. At some point, you're going to find yourself in a situation where maybe you're paying really high taxes because your net profit is, say, over 250K. As an example, I'm just throwing random numbers out in the air. So if that happens, you might want to consider then moving to, say, a private limited company, because the way that you can expense certain claims and how you actually structure your business can change the tax rate that you might be liable for. So understanding what works for you now and understanding what structure you eventually want to work towards, I think is always very helpful. I think in terms of minimums as well, it's important for you to at least have a basic understanding of where your money is going, how you're spending it, and how you're tracking it. So it doesn't have to be complicated. Spreadsheets are, I would say, not ideal because a lot of people don't like them, and then they just kind of get bogged down in the details. At some point they go, this is too much hassle. I'm just going to throw this aside and worry about this later. But there are a lot of simple, cheap applications and software that you can find online where you can even do simple things like take a photo of your receipt, and the system's going to prompt you and say, is this receipt for an entertainment expense? Then you just mark it as entertainment. So having some sort of way of tracking where you're spending your money, whether that's taking photos of your receipts, whether that's putting things in a spreadsheet, whether that's getting a little app to actually help you with that, I think is really a good process to start with when you're getting up and running. Because once you start building that practice of, I'm spending some money at the end of the week or at the end of the month, I need to record it. Once you start doing that regularly, you generally tend to follow on. But if you wait, say, like 9 months after you started running the business and you've got bits and pieces of information all over the place, and then you go, hang on a second, I thought I billed my client this amount of money. Why do I have so little left in the bank? I have no way to track this. What's going on? You then got 9 months of work to do, right? To try and figure out what the heck has happened. So getting, I think, an early, simple, straightforward practice in place is always helpful, because at the end of the day, there's so many different important aspects of the business. Money is a critical one. And you don't want to fall behind on tracking where your money is going. If your client owes you money, you want to be able to follow up with them and get that invoice paid. If you owe people money, you want to make sure that you know exactly who you owe and how much. There's a lot of simple ways that you can achieve that don't have to be scary and intimidating and time consuming.
Are there any apps or AI that you use to help with this? So we were talking about receipts. I know there's apps out there that do this. Is there an AI that's doing this for you? What are you seeing on that front?
To be very honest, if you want to do something straightforward, taking a picture of your receipts just as a form of record keeping still works. That's the easiest way to do it. And in the old days, we used to just do photocopies, so that because they fade sometimes, so you just want to have a photocopy as a record instead. But yeah, taking a photo is the easiest lo-fi version of that. There are quite a few apps that help you do that. Xero and QuickBooks are one of them, sort of two of the options that focus more on the bookkeeping side of things. So if you want something that's a bit more full featured, that's going to say link to your bank account, it's going to pull all your transactions. You can do matching between the invoice you issued to the customer and what actually comes in the bank. You want to be able to reconcile those transactions. I'm saying a lot of stuff now that's getting into the weeds with bookkeeping, but Xero and QuickBooks tend to be better for that because they're sort of a complete system if you want to manage your own bookkeeping. But if you actually just look for expense tracking apps, I need to just take a quick look and see which ones might be good. But there are a few different expense tracking apps where you're literally just tracking what have you spent on a specific day for a specific client. And that's really good enough because that's an app that's going to use AI in the background that's just essentially going to be putting together a spreadsheet for you saying money in, money out. And as a starting point, that's sufficient for you to understand what's going on in your business.
You mentioned getting paid by clients. Let's talk contracts. So let's assume for the sake of it, I'm a consultant. I sell my services, I sell my time. I'm working with a big MNC, big multinational company contracts? Is it even worth sending one if I'm that small? Like if they want to ignore my contract, how does that work?
From my perspective, it's always worth having a contract so that if you reach a position of dispute, you have the option of taking some kind of action. When we talk about this, because in some countries going to court can be very expensive. In other countries going to court can be very cheap, but it's a very long process. It gets dragged out over different court levels. So it really depends, I think, where you're working and what your jurisdiction is. But generally speaking, it's always good to have some form of a control document. I prefer to try and look at it from the perspective of the MNC is not out to try and cheat every consultant that it works with. The consultant is not out to try and cheat the MNC that they're working with. The purpose of the contract is usually not because you're worried that the other side is evil and they're going to screw you over. The purpose of the contract is for you to draw up a structure so that you can communicate what exactly each party is responsible for. And why that's important is because your your priorities and the MNC's priorities are probably going to be different. Like as a solopreneur, you might have content that you own that you want to maintain the IP rights to. That's a couple of clauses in a contract that clearly tells the customer, this is something that's important to me. You do not have the right to use this. If that's something that you want, then we need to have a discussion about that during the contract negotiation stage. But if you just have a quick chat with someone and say, oh, please don't use my IP, it's clearly obviously mine. I've got a registration that's ongoing right now. The person who you're talking to is going to say, sure, that's fine. But that person's not going to be there, potentially. They're not going to be there 3 months or 6 months or 12 months down the road. It's going to be someone else who has no idea what you've talked about. So I personally feel that it is actually really important to use that, even if it's just the basis of having the conversation around who's doing which parts, who's responsible for which parts, what are the deadlines that need to happen. Whether you can defend that defend's the wrong word, whether you can take that contract to court and sue someone for breach of performance or something like that. That's a whole other matter, right? That's further down the line, whether or not you want to actually take action against another party. And you can choose whether you want to take action, or you could say, I'm just a small business. I don't think it's worth my time. Or you could choose to say, let's figure out, maybe the contract didn't go well. Maybe we just land on a 70% fee instead of a 100% fee. You can negotiate all that. But if you don't have a contract in the first place, you don't have a start point for the negotiation. So that's always valuable, in my opinion, to have something written down with the client.
I have a letter of engagement for the listeners. It just basically outlines the scope of work. This is what you do, this is what we do. These are the deliverables, some dates in there. When it comes down to it against a massive corporation, do I have a lot to stand on? Probably not, because I'm just a tiny player. But to your point, I guess it's always good to have that. So let's say you've got all that. One of the biggest headaches, which everybody, particularly small players, small business, solopreneurs struggle with, is getting paid on time. What are some of your top tips around that?
You're not going to like my answer for this. It's documentation. The thing that no one likes to do. It's tracking the work you've done, right? Tracking your deliverables, providing your customer with updates, whether that's emails, whether that's reports, whether that's some kind of presentation going, hey, here's the milestones that we've achieved. Here's what's billable. Here's what's not. Having that sort of communication with the client is always really important, so that you have a leg to stand on when you say, hey, I've finished this work. You're not looking through, say, 3 months of content that you've shared to try and figure that out. You're doing that on a regular basis. So it's always, I think, good to have, if not necessarily milestones, some kind of a regular reporting with your client. The second thing, obviously, is find out early if they have any kind of procurement system that you need to get into. I don't think there's any good procurement system. As you and I have seen, there's so many different large organizations, medium-sized organizations that have their own procurement process. And sometimes getting onboarded into those systems to sign the contract takes 2 days. but getting onboarded into that system to get paid takes 2 months. So you're sitting there thinking, I've finished my contract, everything's really great, I'm going to send the invoice now. And then you get an email reply going, thank you for your invoice. Here is the 47-step process that we need and the 62,000 documents that we need from you in order to pay you. So getting that out of the way early, or at least kicking off that process early, allows you to follow through as you're doing the project, to follow through on getting onboarded into the procurement system as early as possible.
Nice. Yeah, we've seen this. We've learned this the hard way, haven't we? I mean, we've had this a couple of times, and that's why I'm so glad to be working with you, because I think it's important to bring somebody in who can do that for you, can help you with that, who's just much more of an expert in that field. And the fun part about it is that you and I, we've done this a couple of times where we play good cop, bad cop, where I will go back to a client who, let's say they haven't paid on time, they've missed the deadline. And I can then be like, well, I would like to help you there, John, but the finance team is breathing down my neck, and they don't know that finance team is you. Same word with policy. I use the word policy. It's our policy, like this. And then we can play on each other. And I think that is invaluable to have, not only to have somebody who actually knows what they're doing, but to have a bit of a sparring partner in this on this front as well.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's definitely been really helpful. I think that there's one level of communication that you have with the procurement and the finance side, and then there's a different level of communication that you have with the customer. And sometimes you want to maintain that customer relationship in a way that doesn't get bogged down by the small details of, can you get, I don't know, Sally from finance to reply to my email because I sent her the documents that need to be processed or something like that. You want to be able to have that relationship with your customer that's focused, or your client that's focused more on, what is the work that we're trying to do? What is the cool, interesting new thing we're trying to achieve? What is it that we're trying to push forward in your business? And so, yeah, I agree. Having that sort of like good cop, bad cop play off each other, or different levels of communication within the organization, definitely helps with keeping those two things separate.
What was the hardest money for us to get? We don't have to name the client. We don't have to name particularly who, but what was the one? I know we had to send documentation to another country, which after the work had already been done. So we've signed a contract, did the work. They said, for us to pay you, you need to send us like printed documents. Was that the hardest one, or have we had something else where it was a bit of a nightmare?
No, I think that one's probably the hardest one, because that also had the added complication of the customer was one of the branches of the organization, but the people who were receiving the service were a different part of the organization. So they're completely different entities. And then the paying party was a whole other entity. So there were 3 entities that all kind of go by the same name. But when you actually look at, like, what is their registration number? What is their procurement process? Who do I send this invoice to? What is the correct email address to send it to? It's all different. And we didn't have any of that information, because when the documents were signed, it was all signed with party A, who had initiated the conversation. So happily going down the rabbit hole of, let's get fully set up with these guys. Let's make sure we have everything with them. And then submitting the final document, and they go, oh, hang on a second. It's a whole other entity you need to get set up with. And then having to do that, 2 more times. That was definitely, I think, the longest that it took to get into the system just to be able to get paid. And I remember even after we submitted documentation and they said they would help, it still ended up being sort of 45 days or something, way after, weeks and weeks and weeks after the work was done, because party C doesn't care that the work was done for party A, do they? As far as they're concerned, I'm just finance. I'm just putting this in the system. It's going to get queued up for normal. So sucks to be you. But yeah, we'll get back to you in 45 days.
I know some people here listening might be working with individuals, might be working with small business, whatever it is. The good thing I always find with big business, even though their systems can be very onerous, things can take a long time, I'm not too worried about them not paying. Usually it's a machine. It's nothing personal. They're not evil, like you just said. It's just a complex machine with multiple cogs, multiple silos, and the machine just works and spits out something. We have to the machine takes time. When it comes to that, is a good practice always get payment up front? So let's say you're doing a project, coaching, training, whatever, should you just get 50% up front? Is that something that's standard, and how do you get that?
It varies depending on the industry, but generally speaking, I would say a lot of the clients that I work with in consulting will at least ask for something like 30 to 50% upfront, and they're generally successful with getting that pushed through. I I believe a part of it has to do with the strength of the relationship, but part of it also has to do with the fact that at the end of the day, this company does value the expertise that you're bringing in, and they do want to make sure that you're fully engaged with the project. So as long as you are able to put that in the correct frame for the client, they're generally, in my experience, willing to actually do an upfront deposit payment, because then they know A, you're committed, B, they've got the ability to be prioritized over your other customers, and C, once that's signed, once you've received the money, usually as the consultant yourself, you're going to be a lot more switched on. You're going to be a lot more interested in getting the ball rolling on that one. So for a variety of different reasons, I think, yeah, it's definitely a good thing to do. And generally, as I said, it is successful.
So what I'm hearing from other people is that getting paid is one of the biggest headaches, and that also puts people in the danger zone because they basically eventually run out of money and then have to close shop, or they are forced to make decisions they don't want to make. And my point is, I do think you can get paid up front, or at least paid on time, if you are, to your point, clear about what it is that you deliver and where. I think you can always come to an agreement. Think about payment terms. What is normal for them to pay? Sometimes in Asia, people say 90 to 120 days, which I think is ridiculous. Other companies might be 30. But to have some clarity on that, and if that clarity isn't there, yeah, then somebody's going to take their sweet time paying you. What do you see?
I see that they're generally successful in asking for something up front. It's not a huge amount, though. It's something like 30% or less. But maybe that's just the nature of the consulting work that I'm seeing, because I think, especially recently in the last sort of 5 years, a lot of the consulting work that I've seen really is a company saying to a consultant, I want to have someone run a program for me, or I'm looking at an organizational change project. So the consultant has to actually do a huge amount of work up front. And that's a really good sort of way to get your foot in the door to say, well, look, client, I'm going to have to do a whole bunch of research. I'm going to have to work with your team. I'm going to have to spend a huge amount of hours just to get to the point that I can start having the conversations with people in your company. This is why I'm asking for the deposit.
You work with clients as well. You run your own business. What are the traits of a good client in your eyes?
I am most comfortable working with a client is when they're quite clear about the scope and they're willing to spend a little bit of time, not a lot of time, but at least a little bit of time having a discussion about what exactly the scope is, how we want to achieve it, and go into a little bit of detail into things like timelines, into things like expectations, manpower hours, and such. I think that clear communication allows me to then take the project and work with it in a quite independent way without having to sort of go back every little while and be like, hey, I just need to check in with you on this or that or the other. And having that autonomy, because I understand what the client is trying to get to, usually allows me to do my best work. Communication is the short answer.
And what makes for a good corporate secretary?
What do you think makes a good corporate secretary?
I think what makes for a good corporate secretary for me is somebody who is willing to think with me. As based on what I've seen, is there's a bunch of companies that offer these kind of services, but there's very little thinking behind it. It just feels like I'm throwing something down a dark hole and something comes out. They might file something, but I don't really have a conversation with them. The ones I've had experience with, and again, is very limited. So what makes it good for me is somebody to help me think through a couple of things as well, somebody I can bounce off some ideas with, who understands what I do, and somebody who's kind of fun to hang out with as well, because you and I can talk about other things as well, which I think makes this relationship quite interesting rather than just transactional.
I think it's always nice to get to the point where you've worked with someone enough and you're familiar with them and you enjoy working with them to the point that you can kind of move beyond just the work conversations, and you can talk about deeper motivations. You can talk about interesting little stories and life and things like that. It's always good to know that you can have that sort of trust with another person, even though we've met through work.
It's important to have that outside the work conversation as well, because we're all just kind of running our own little ships. It's not like we have a massive team of colleagues to bounce off ideas with. So how do you do this? You run your own business, you sell your services. Except for me, do you have a network of people you talk to Do you have other corporate secretaries you deal with? Like, how do you get out of your little bubble?
I think I've been just really, really lucky in the sense that I've had lots of great clients that I've had the chance to sort of build a relationship with over time. Some of my clients I've been with for 10, 12 years. So that's been really beneficial because every single client comes from a different background. They're doing different types of businesses. They've got different skills. And so that definitely has helped me expand the way that I think about the world and that I experience the world through all of these different relationships. And then just personally, I like having a bit of a social life. I like doing my hobbies and meeting people through those hobbies and having other conversations just outside of work. So I think that that's always comes in helpful to just know that you can step away from the work and be a person who's not just an entrepreneur or a business owner 24/7. Yes, the hustle is important, but also having a life outside of that is just as important to being a good business owner as it is being in the business day to day.
Do you still do your game nights? Is that still a thing? Or is that
The
passe?
board game stuff? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do, yeah. I try and do at least one a week. And sometimes we do a few more, like maybe 2, 3 days a week, depending on who's available, what's going on. We're playing this game, which I won't bore you with, but it can go for 8 hours and it's a bit of a war game and it's very intense. It happens maybe once a year. Yeah, so I try and keep that up. I try and do my ballroom dancing classes, a few different hobbies that I like to engage with, just to keep sane outside of the day-to-day work life, right?
I think so too. I think we all need to get out there and do different things because we are complex people. We have more sides to us. And with that in mind, I'm going to go for the lightning round. I've got 10 special questions just for you. Quick answers. Are you ready?
I am not, but please go ahead. We'll see what happens.
The lightning round.
Wine or beer?
Beer.
What's one thing about running your own business that surprised you the most?
How many people said it was a bad idea?
What's a belief about being self-employed that you think is complete bullshit?
That you have to be switched on 24/7 all day, every day in order to be successful.
If you couldn't do what you're doing now, you cannot do anything related to this kind of work. What other role would you be playing?
I would love to go into research. I would love to go do research studies and look at data.
What is the best piece of advice you've ignored?
What is the best piece of it? This is not a lightning round, is it? What is the best piece of advice that I've ignored? Are you looking for something that is like, it turned out to be good and I was mistaken? Or are you looking for something where it's like conventionally considered good, but actually it's not? I don't know what's going on
I'll
here.
flip
I'm
it
confused.
around.
Okay.
What's the worst advice you've ever followed?
To invest in someone's business because they were really good in a large organization.
If money was not an issue, which motorbike would you buy tomorrow?
I would buy, oh no, this is such a hard question. This may be the hardest question of all the questions. Oh my God. But there's so many good bikes. Yuri, you can't ask me this question. There's so many good okay. What's the Diablo? Wait, let me give
The
you an exact
Diablo?
model. Yeah. Hold on. Let me give you the exact model. The one that's called the License Killer. I know, right? Wait. I need the full name
Lightning
of it.
round my ass.
This is what cuts are for, no?
If money were not an issue, which motorbike would you buy and why?
Any of the Arch motorcycles because they are all complete pieces of art.
They're called Arch or Art?
Arch. The range that
Okay.
Keanu Reeves put together with this motorcycle builder in, I think, California.
What is one book that completely changed the way you work?
You should have sent me these in advance. I could have prepared. You know, when people ask me these kinds of questions, my brain just goes blank. And then like 6 hours later, I'll be like, oh, of course, that one and the other one and this author and that one and blah, blah, blah. And yeah, like What's the one written with the guy with the, oh my God, why are you doing this to me?
That's why this lightning round is so much fun.
It's a really boring answer, but the Carnegie guy, the how to make
Dale Carnegie?
friends and what is it? How to make
Influence
friends and
people.
influence people. That was one of the first books that I read where I realized that it's almost more important to put yourself in the other person's shoes and consider their motivations than it is to consider yours. You get a lot more done when you're looking at other people's motivations instead of your own.
I like that. Since we just started the new year, this new year is going to be ...
These questions, man, they're like so stressful. What the fuck? No. Why? This new year is gonna be character building.
This new year is going to be character building. I think that is a perfect one to start this new year with. Hey, where can people find you?
So I have a website, colibri.sg, where they can drop me a message or send me an email. All the information is on www.colibri.sg.
Lovely. I'll leave that in the show notes as well. Again, Loucille, absolute pleasure having you here. I thought this was fun. I think we have a lot of history. We could unpack so many more stories to put the pressure on you with the lightning round. It's been an absolute pleasure working with you over a decade. And here's to more to come.
Thank you. This has been less painful than I expected. As you know, I am an introvert. And so this is, what the fuck? But no, this has been less painful than I expected. So thank you.
Before I leave you with my thoughts, I just want to say a huge thank you to Loucille for joining me on this episode. We've been working together for over a decade, and there's so much gold dust in what she was sharing today, because it's the things that people don't always think about right away. Make sure you connect with her. I'll leave the links in the show notes. And while you're there, if you like topics like these, you can also sign up for my weekly newsletter called The Solo Sauce. Link is here below as well. So here are my thoughts. How much attention are you paying to the boring stuff? And for people listening, I'm putting those in inverted commas because it's not really the boring stuff at all. It's super important. Think things like contracts and structures and payments and banking and documentation. Because as much as we all like to spend time on the creative side, the more visible side, it's often the invisible side where things break first. Missed deadlines, unclear agreements, people, things that were not properly defined from the get-go. Or in short, what am I ignoring now that might bite me in the ass later on? Good question to ask. Make it a great day, and I'll see you in the next episode.